Welcome back. Uh, Once again, we're going to take a look at character types, and plot and identify the relationships in the text Uncle Marcos for the second part, and still to chat a little bit about the genre of magical realism. Let's do a quick review of the different types. Static character, the character that stays the same throughout the story. Dynamic character, character that changes due to events in the story. A flat character is a character in which we know very limited information about, and a round character is a character we know a lot of information about. Now, one of the reasons why this is kind of an imperfect example that the textbook shows, and there might not be a perfect one out there, is that this novel, The House of Spirits, is a little over 500 pages. So it is an epic. And Clara is the main character, and we kind of stick with Clara for um, all of those pages. So that while there's a wide cast of characters, Clara is definitely the dynamic and changing character. Is that she doesn't have a lot of occasion to do so in the little bit we get between her and Uncle Marcos. Uncle Marcos, while a round character, is not dynamic. He doesn't change, but he certainly has a few different sides to him. But doesn't get a chance to fully exercise them either because he just dies in this one. So um, that's my little disclaimer. All right. But let's talk about those different types of characters as we read a little bit of this together. Let's do our close reading. The little girl, who was only 7 at the time, had learned to read from her uncle's storybooks and had been closer to him than any other member of the family because of her prophesying powers. All right, so we learn that there's a connection between these two characters, and as suggested in the book, we should definitely look at these two characters. Or the parts that sections that describe Claire and Uncle Marcos, determine whether each character is round or flat, and determine whether each character is static or dynamic. For both A and B, explain your responses, cite textual details. We're kind of going to do that together, okay? To help with this assessment a little bit. So the little girl, who was only 7 at the time, had learned to read from her uncle's storybooks and had been closer to him than any other member of the family because of the prophesying powers of her prophesying. So closer to him. Marcos maintained that his niece's gift could be a source of income and a good opportunity for him to cultivate his own clairvoyance. Now, this notion that he's going to use it for profit, or he's going to just sort of be have a single-minded drive about making this profit, would suggest that he's a little bit of a static character, kind of always just focused on getting attention for himself and some money. And good opportunity for him to cultivate his own. So he believed that all human beings possess this ability, particularly his own family, and that if it did not function well, it was simply due to a lack of training. He bought a crystal ball in a Persian bazaar, insisting that it had magic powers and was from the East. In this situation here, we have the magical realism, right? He's insisting that it has magical powers. We have someone who is clairvoyant and can prophesize and see into the future, right? All of these elements together kind of point out that yeah, this is magical realism. It's not like Frodo showing up with some ring he's got to dump in Mount Doom, right? It's this mixture of a realistic narrative and suddenly magic just shows up like basic reportage. So back to characters. So it was from the east, although it was later found to be part of a buoy from a fishing boat. Set it down on the black background of black velvet and announced that he could tell people's fortunes, cure the evil eye, and improve the quality of dreams, all for the modest sum of 5 centavos. His first customers were the maids from around the neighborhood. One of them had been accused of stealing because her employer had misplaced a valuable ring. The crystal ball revealed, oh, there it is. Wow! The exact location of the object in question. It had rolled beneath a wardrobe. The next day, there was a line outside the front door of the house, and there were coachmen, storekeepers, Alexa, stop, uh, and milkmen. Later, a few municipal employees and distinguished ladies made a discreet appearance, slinking alongside the walls of the house to keep from being recognized. Okay? Now, all of these are sort of stereotypes of different class types. Um, there's absolutely preoccupations with class in this novel, which takes place in Chile and is sort of like a cosmogony or a telling of the beginnings of the country's identity, um, and how it becomes formed and how it eventually leads to Pinochet. They don't have Pinochet in there, but they have a guy who kind of stands for him. And Pinochet, if you were to look up what he did in the country of Chile, you would be like, oh my gosh, right? Who ruled by terror in Chile. Uh, right? He was a brutal dictator. Brutal. Would throw people out of helicopters all the time. He was a nut. Um, this task kept her busy throughout the day and demanded so much of her time that the family began to complain that all there ever was for dinner was old string beans and jelly quince. Marcos decorated the carriage with some frayed curtains that had once belonged in the drawing room, but that neglect and age had turned to dusty rags. There he and Claire received the customers, so there we are, sort of, the two are being joined again. The two divine wore tunics, the color of men of light, as Marcos called the color yellow. Nana, their sort of housekeeper, had dyed them with saffron powder, boiling them in pots, usually reserved for rice and pasta. Oh, alchemy, then suddenly saffron powder, my lord. In addition to his tunic, Marcos wore a turban around his head and an Egyptian amulet around his neck. He'd grown a beard and let his hair grow longer, and he was thinner than ever before. Marcos and Clara were utterly convincing, especially because the child had no need to look into the crystal ball to guess what her clients wanted to hear. She would whisper in her Uncle Marcus's ear and in turn would transmit the message to the client along with any improvisations of his own that he thought pertinent. Thus their fame spread because all those who had arrived sad and bedraggled at the consulting room left filled with hope. Unrequited lovers were told how to win over uh, uh, indifferent hearts, and the poor left with foolproof tips on how to place their money at the dog track. Business grew so prosperous that the waiting room was always packed with people, and Nana began to suffer dizzy spells from being on her feet so many hours a day. This time, Severo had no need to intervene to put a stop to his brother in law's adventures, for Marcus and Clara, realizing that their unerring guesses could alter the fate of their clients, who had always followed their advice to the letter, became frightened and decided that this was a job for swindlers. They abandoned their carriage house oracle and split the profits, even though the only one who cared about the material side of things had been Nana. Okay? Last little bit about their relationship. Of all the Del Valle children, Clara was one of the greatest. Oh, 1 second. Okay. Sorry, toddler on the loose. With the greatest interest and stamina for her uncle's stories. All right? So, she has a great interest in his stories. She can listen to them more than anybody else. She has this. She knew by heart words from several dialects of the Indians and was acquainted with their customs. She could repeat each and every one of them. She was acquainted with the custom and could describe the exact way in which they pierce their lips and earlobes with wooden shafts, their initiation rites, and names of the most poisonous snakes, and the appropriate antidote for each. Her uncle was so eloquent that the child could feel in her own skin the burning sting of snake bites see reptiles slide across. Right? So we get another eloquent. So, what characters seem flat so far? Well, in this passage, we get a lot of information about how Clara and Uncle Marcos share a lot of things. And if I had to draw any conclusions here, I would say even though he's a little more single minded than her, and of course, like I said, she changes over the course of the novel, these details tend to reveal that there's a lot of layers and levels to both characters. So if we go back to what the textbook is saying, all right, which whether each character is static or dynamic, I would say Uncle Marcos is static. Would I say he is flat? No, I would say he's round. But because of his short stay in the novel itself, I'd say he is a round, static character. Now, Clara is round and she's dynamic, right? She is someone who develops throughout the story, and she is changed by her uncle's death. um, more than other members of the family, and sort of shapes her fate. Uh, okay, so that was just sort of like a quick little go over of the different character types and looking at some of the details that would suggest whether they are static, round, flat, or dynamic. Like I said, a lot of it requires quite a lot of inferencing. So you have to look at the whole novel as a whole. Um, for advanced students, and this is for parents too, getting one of these, not one of the ones that has access to other parts of the internet, but getting one of these Kindle readers really opens up a lot of books, and they're a lot cheaper too, to focusing just on reading. And you can store a ton of books in there. You can access Overdrive and get this book through the library, Montgomeryville website. It is absolutely a great resource. So, if you could, the last thing we're going to do before we sign out is we're going to do a little active recall. Don't look at your notes, right? Don't look at the book. Don't look at other parts of this video, but you're going to explain to an object that's closest hand. And in this case, it is a bib. And I'm going to take a moment and explain what I just learned. All right. Have a good one.